G'day friends and fans, welcome to Dave Talk Stuff. Alright, the commercialization of reproduction part 1. Now this is a multi-part series, and in the first part we are dealing with marriage. Now the commercialization of marriage has been going on for decades. It is a transformation from the lifelong commitment, a simple ceremony, a simple exchange of vows, to a highly monetized, market-driven event, often driven to mimic the flaunting of wealth of celebrity weddings. It is now a massive growth industry globally. It is no longer a cultural event, but part of the commodifications of relationships and the application of economic forces to human relationships that have turned marriage and divorce into vital economic industries as a subset of human relationships and human reproduction, because the governments of the world, led by China of all, and the United Nations, seeks nothing more than to turn the human race into another commodity. We already looked at it as assets. We are the means of production, which they seek to control. Now, before I continue, I'd like to remind you that this channel is sponsored by you, the viewing audience. The Empire Valves. That's one word, empirevalves.myshopify.com. Your one-stop shop for beautiful artifacts with hand-drawn art. These are created by a human. Beautiful artwork. This is the Empress Sora. All inspired by my writing. Now you might think, robots. Well, before we get to robots and the commercialization of human relationships, it starts with the decades-long creation of the wedding industrial complex, followed by the divorce industrial complex. Now, the most visible form of commercialization of human reproduction is the multi-billion-dollar wedding industry. Corporate branding, aggressive marketing, entire photography studios, wedding planners, wedding dresses, engagement rings, elaborate destinations for honeymoons, bachelorette trips, bachelor parties, social media events, wedding gift registry, ball rooms, once proudly held weekly dances, are now almost exclusively only for weddings. Now, remember, there is an entire aesthetic that is formulated around the so-called real wedding, including, of course, the bridal magazine. Sociologists have noticed that the marketization has shifted the focus from long-term relationships to immediate short-term relationships set upon by short-term goals, flawless single-day events, and significant debt, burdened by the husband and his family, where there is no human emotion or value in beyond the ceremony. There is no romantic relationship. They are increasingly, the fundamental nature of the romantic relationship is increasingly commodified, starting with dating apps. It's literally called the dating market. You have been baby stepped towards a complete corporate state. China is shifting from communism to fascism before our very eyes. The ending of private enterprise in China is occurring before our very eyes. North Korea is dropping the word communist. We are seeing, even in Cuba, where were seeing the island trying to become a single entity where rights don't exist. We're seeing in Vietnam the relaxing of every government is trying different models. The European liberal market is a failure. It's propped up by debt. It's propped up by artificial financial instruments. There is no physical asset that you can transform your currency into. Even because there's no guarantee of private property. Your rights have been eroded. And it started with the commodification of humanity itself. Going beyond the free exchange of labour for goods and services, the value of a human is increasingly regulated, and the fundamental nature of human relationships has been polluted by greed. And in order to achieve the transformation of women into an instrument of the state has been done through fear, hatred, to inspire revenge motivations. It starts with the dating market, where the culture surrounding the dating market is, again, shifted from finding a long-term relationship to finding a transactional-based relationship where the man is forced to engage routinely in begging, borrowing, or bargaining to engage in a relationship. Traditional practices across the world are dying or being transformed, such as the bride price, whether it's China, even in the Middle East and India. Increasingly, it's looking no different from medieval Europe, where daughters were lined up and bid on by rich men. And the relationships themselves are contracts, nothing more, nothing less. Traditional relationships are often exploited, and they have shifted from symbolic tokens of love into a highly commercialized transaction where everything is bargained or begged on or paid for by the man. It's paid for with ego. If it's not money, it's houses, cars, jewelry, It is basically the marital bargain, where legal and economic factors have commercialized marriage, household economics, homemaking, and of course the divorce industry, where the lawyers created the word equity from equality in order to fleece the productive, to ensure the lawyer and their instruments walk away richer than they started. The wedding industry has gone from once in a lifetime event to an average of 3. Women are getting married on an average 3 times, with 3 equally messy divorces. Weddings come at a premium price. Vendors have wedding taxes, where anything associated with a wedding comes at a premium price. Those weird, considering normally in a normal market for competition, prices would go down. No, there is a wedding mafia, and it is the government, our governments. Large venues cannot exist financially without the government. Otherwise, the property taxes alone would destroy most of them, so they spread the cost. But behind these weddings and wedding places are financiers. They provide everything at a bargain they get everything at a bargain and provide everything at a premium. And it takes an emotional toll. Markets have convinced couples that cutting cost does not reflect commitment. Increasingly, women have been sold jewelry as a token of love and appreciation and affection. There's an entire industry, the bauble industry, where you would see men delivering gifts through sites, particularly remember gift.com, wedding planners, all these sites. Men would be buying these expensive gifts as a way to get around national prostitution laws. Now, because these came at a premium, eventually men, as the economy shrank, particularly getting more and more men divorced, this industry has started to collapse. Now, one of the reasons why it lasted from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s was debt normalization. Once upon a time, we were educated or indoctrinated. It was a religious practice in the West to neither be a beggar or a borrower. If you wanted charity, you went to the church. If you wanted to get married, you went to the church. If you wanted to date, you would go to someone's house and frequently engage in polite conversation with both the daughter and the parent. Dating was rare, and it was usually a ride through the countryside to discuss the coming wedding. often arranged so that any, let's say, social interaction that occurred would be in time for the wedding or a guarantee for the wedding, so that there'd be no baby bump until after the wedding. Now, debt normalization has transformed society. We spend more, though we earn less. Thus, we get to retirement with nothing. The global standardization has occurred through social media, television, movies, radio, no one media, right? The diamond standard, however. The diamond industry is a global industry that, by necessity, in that as diamonds increase in price, the diamond merchants would move from country to country, increasing their prices until they basically became a commodity in which no one could afford. But by then, they were billionaires only interested in the large transaction of diamonds anyway. Most people don't buy jewelry anymore, but the jewelry industry is so rich, they don't care. They have concentrated wealth in the form of not hundreds, not thousands, but tens of billions of carats of diamonds. If I told you China is sitting on the world's largest collection of diamonds and jewelry, trust me, please, because it is locked away in the National Treasury. It's actually on or in the compound in which is only lived by one family, Xi Jinping, the current ruler of China. Now, it's believed, but cannot be proven, that it's actually these wives of the Chinese communists are descended from the ancient rulers of China. There are no sons. That's why there's no emperor. The last emperor, right? They killed him and his male. They killed all the males. No, none of the females were murdered. They were the 110,000 brides of the emperor who, no one knows their fate. And it's believed they became brides of the Communist Party. Now, they carried with them a great treasury of wealth, which they transferred for their lives. So the story goes that China is sitting on 6 trillion in diamonds and other wealth from the imperial treasury, including one of the rarest minerals in the world, the legendary jadeite, in its most purest form. There is, however, a national inquiry going on in China into the theft of millions of artifacts from museums, and they're blaming the West, but the West didn't loot China. China looted China, and this is leading to a collapse there because gold and other precious minerals were part of the commoditization of wedding. And when people die, the state would take that gold back to resell over and over and over again. A lot of your commodities are not allowed to leave China. So, also, one thing in China is the wedding dress. The wedding dress, the white dress, has become symbolic around the world. It is even in many places where traditional garments were colourful, its design and aesthetics have slowly crept in. And now a lot of the once beautiful bride gowns of say, India are gone. Not entirely, the rich. But the destination trend is another one. The entire tourist industries, remember, entire tourist industries once relied on weddings. Now, media and social media was used to coerce people into believing what a wedding was. Now, remember, through the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, they all made movies, they made romances, they made legal dramas around divorces on television. They movie stars increasingly flaunted their weddings, divorces, never their children. Now, Instagram pushed in the early days wedding photos, ultra luxury weddings, extravagant weddings, and tried to get everyday consumers to take part in this. By the late 2000s, as MGTOW and other movements in the manosphere took off, these industries started to collapse. But as they collapsed, they tried to salvage, they being the government and the people behind the financial markets who drive the for-profit industries, take the concept of the wedding and they tried to create, the discount wedding, I suppose, for a better term, where you would personalize weddings. First, you buy a pre-packaged wedding, and get the bulk discount that was never passed on to us in the first place. That 20% off should have been applied anyway. Because if you go to get a wedding dress made, it doesn't cost less than in the store. If you make your own wedding dress, it doesn't cost less than in the store. They make everything so expensive. And then what they do, they pass on their bulk discount so that the store is cheaper. And the wedding venues, they were all in it together. Photo booths, snack trucks, market tents, marquee tent events in parks rather than, these big expensive venues, many of which had to close anyway because they're old and weren't maintained in order to maximize profit, and later turned into apartment buildings. Now, there's case studies you could go into the diamond industry, such as De Beers, look at The Last Emperor, look at the anti-wedding movement of feminists. There's also the micro-wedding movement, which is also dying because weddings themselves are dying. Marriage has become too expensive for the everyday man. So interpersonal relationships are becoming more and more, let's do it, let's, basically in and out without any process in order to form lifetime habits. See, people don't understand the psychology behind the processes of the past and why they occurred in the first place. Because the more you entwined your lives, the more you got to know each other, the more you withheld getting married until both parties agreed, both parents agreed, you were mature, stable, and you didn't have any wanderlust in your body. Many, however, just want the quick fix to their wanderlust. I wonder what it's like, and on the other hand, I can't wait to get more, marital industry, of course, gave birth to the divorce industry, where marital dissolution has the splitting of assets based on laws. In other words, feminist votes and financial contributions by lawyers and legal groups to the government. And, of course, a huge growing industry is the contract arrangement, where couples go to a law office, civil union, sign a document. In most cases, men are signing away half their assets from the get-go, knowing at some point what they owned at that time is gone. Without any reward. It is a one-way transaction. And any wonder more and more men are walking away. Now, there are various property schemes, distributions, and funds such as funds and fund management. There are ways the rich use to avoid upfront divorce and delay for as long as they can, often transferring greater wealth upon their death to the wife rather than an equal distribution of their funds. Fair distribution does not mean your children get anything, or it's even split fairly. No, often the wife gets half and the children get a share, but even then, sometimes it's done prior to death in order to avoid taxes. However, human capital is often valued, and they only consider the wife's contribution to the household, which means the distribution is not fair. And that's why they divorce before 18, so that the child gets nothing. It's winner take all in the marriage game. It is a great wealth transfer up until recently, because more and more, they've been going after retirement funds, corporate funds, and more people have just seen post-divorce a sudden drop in living standards, because the woman doesn't value anything other than what she can get. She doesn't value the company or she is always and only fixated on her safety, comfort, and security in old age. And increasingly, they don't want some bony old man who can't take care of himself to take care, so they leave. And they often wait until they're in their prime so they can go around chasing young men so they can have that wanderlust. Now, attempts to bypass statutory frameworks around marriage have been mostly unsuccessful. The state has kept ahead, thanks to lawyers and legal work, has been keeping ahead of anti-marriage trends, such as the new de facto laws in Australia, UK, US, some states, to mimic the same laws for marriage as civil unions, even dating. I think some states now, you can be dating for 6 weeks or cohabiting for 6 weeks, or even know someone for more than 6 weeks, and she's suddenly your girlfriend, or de facto. If you contribute financially to a woman, you are now hooked. They have sunk their claws into your kidneys, and if they can't get what they want, they rip that kidney out. Now, I would say the heart, but they don't want to kill you. They just want you to bleed to death as they sell your blood. Now, the legal difference between de facto partnership and registered marriage is gone. Though there are some frameworks in some countries that keep a difference, but it all starts with dating, the dating pool. The struggle to find a partner, or even struggle to find someone who will commit to one person. You're now commodified. You're a profile. You're a retail product on a shelf to be picked on your aesthetics, based purely on superficial metrics. getting to know each other is a match on a handful of questions. And whether or not this reduces the willingness to work for relationships, well, let me tell you, it's made it easier for women to devalue the relationship, to get satisfaction from drama, knowing that once she's got a lot of men on the hook, that she can now go through a lot of men physically and financially without any consequence. Well, so they thought. The psychological breakdown of women, as you know, has reached an all-time high. The highest percentage in the world being the United States for depression and early termination of life. With many women around the world, even in the Middle East, even in the most orthodox countries, women have commodified marriage to their psychological detriment. Treating yourself like a disposable asset has turned you into, basically, there is something that fundamentally changes in a woman from the moment she's first had sex, and the more partners, the more damage is done. It is a biological means to limit reproduction. So women who enjoy sex a lot and go through it a lot, they go through a very strange transformation, and then they suddenly hit the wall and bam, the psychological damage, and you see what they turn into. It's scary. Now, as women age, it gets worse. But you have social problems. Now, historically, relationships were based on proquinity, that is, physical proximity and physical resemblance. You had the same neighborhood, you had the same friends, you went to the same school, and you were physically resemble each other. This continued genetic lines, this created societies, this created linguistic groupings, social groupings, and civilization. Marriage was hyper-individual. You didn't pick men on their size of their chest, or their penis, or their wallet, or their height. You pick someone, often at least a decade older than you, or a few years old, at least half a decade, 5 years, 5 to 10 years, in some countries 5 to 15 years older than you. And you engaged in a mutual friendship for life, which you rewarded weekly or bi-weekly with sexual intercourse at regular intervals to avoid pregnancy. These were things that were well worked out, that if women had regular social interactions with their friends and their neighbors, and they all knew each other, there was a harmony that provided mental stability. But then came polarization of the world, hypergamy, and market asymmetry. The winner-take-all attitude that emerged from World War II, the demographic changes after World War II, and the inequality in romance, where women have no love or desire for broke boys, despite the fact that broke boys are the vast majority of the world. And don't forget, women are not as financially well off as men, so they are even worse. But you'll have Now, particularly with the commodification of looks on Instagram and social media in general, you have women who merely are famous for their boobs. And they don't even get to see anything other than a bit of a window to the top part of the flesh. The less photogenic a man, the less income of a man, and in some cases, social ranking all plays a part. Now, there's been a seismic shift in relationships with the push for LGBTQ plus and other basically older adults and even young adults now to be commodified, where the marriage movement artificially placed on originally just gays and lesbians the artificial marriage industry, commodifying sex and sexuality itself, have increasingly, well, it's claimed that Pacific groups have benefited from marriage. So did men and women in the first place. But now you have the rise of dating fatigue, marriage fatigue, relationship fatigue. Even people who identify as LGBTQ plus are desexualizing and decoupling because the relationships and the sexualization and the monetization of sexuality and appearance is leading to people to be just huffed. They can't be bothered dating. The once vibrant community was decimated by disease, and the politicization has led to many not wanting to take part in that community anymore. So you have a return to you have gay men checking out, not as often as gay women. But dating app fatigue, marriage fatigue, and in general, I'm not saying, I would say the rise in self-gratification, particularly amongst women, has led to a rise in anti-sex, where you have outwardly women wanting social relationships, but inwardly they have their pleasure toys up the wazoo. Literally. So by the transformation of marriage to a ritual that was meant to bind and make it hard to get into so that you would value the marriage and the person you marry, has turned into a one-way relationship where she has a relationship with your wallet and the person she values the most, other than her gynecologist, is her lawyer. And her social media, her entertainment is all geared towards a commodification of relationships. There is no alternative. Even amongst Christian fundamental groups, there is no strength of value. Even amongst Muslim groups, there is no value. The amount of people who adhere to belief over money is decreasing. And the process is called secularization. And in China, leading sociologists have said the secularization of Chinese society has fundamentally harmed the world. Because whether you like it or not, It is the source of secularism today. It is the source of polyatheism today. Now, polyatheism is a politicization of atheism, where you have political groups whose core fundamental is atheism, wrapped around each other so you have liberalism, communism, fascism, socialism, all the brands, and Islam, all under bricks, all grinding each other, all pushing and pulling until they become a homogeneous group, all core valued around atheism. Now, why would Islam be aligned? Because the fundamentals of Islam, and this may sound strange, have more in common with the secular atheist groups than Christianity or Judaism. Islam superficially is nothing more than a photocopy of other religions mashed together. And you may find this insulting, you may find this blasphemous, but the fundamental truth is how a group of Muslims within BRICS view Islam. And they view Islam as nothing more than an ism, a political movement to be exploited for their financial gain. And you see them in India, you see them throughout BRICS countries. They are fundamentally the wealthiest and the most powerful and influential people within BRICS individually. And their adherence to Islam is pretty much like the King of Mali. Lip service only, brother. Lip service only. And they are seen increasingly in why Saudi Arabia was trying to isolate itself. It was trying to stop the spread of secularism in the Middle East. Because how do you identify someone who is only paying lip service to Islam when on the surface they do everything publicly right, but privately, to them it's just it's a laugh, it's a tool. There's no heart. How do you fundamentally tell the difference when they can answer the 10 out of 10 questions better than most practitioners, but they don't practice it? Not in the fundamental ways. Not at the deepest levels. They are superficial. You pick up a Muslim pamphlet and you can go through probably the first couple of tenets and you'd recognize them. But most of them you wouldn't know. And you wouldn't realize were there. And most Muslims, there's more tenets in Islam than you can memorize. Was there 112 surahs or whatever it is? Or tenets or whatever? Very few people can memorize that many statements, let alone adhere to them. Because to be fundamentally indoctrinated to that level goes against our biological imperative of individuality. And in communist China, particularly, where you have both deeply religious people and superficial secularization, it's not just Islam, it's communism as well. So you have a very growing movement of superficial people with enough money and wealth to control and own media. Now, the psychology employed on the mass scale is very difficult to break down, but you can see the results. And the most basic tool they use is social media influence. Monkey see, monkey do. So they fund and create superstars that meet their level of superficial person. They purposely find hypocrites who mask their true nature. They seek each other out and they exploit each other. Where you have the influencer and the handler, usually a talent agency like Legendary, Aspire, you name it, there are dozens of them. And a lot of them also have genuine clients. Most of the agencies, I would say, are merely existing. They don't have any idea what their role in geopolitics is. But geopolitically, you always wonder, how did this asshole get so rich and so popular? Viewbots. Where do they come from? China. You think someone in China is sitting there with 100 phones influencing the outcome? How much you think how much they cost? Bro, this is a state enterprise. Whether you know it or not, it is all. You look at recently the gold scandal in the CIA. 40 million for an influence campaign. 40 million for an influence campaign was stolen. Yeah. We all know where it was going to be. We all know where things fell apart recently. We all know, remember when people walked away from the negotiating tables, we know what happened. The money didn't arrive. It was stolen. We all know, if you've watched my videos on Ukraine, it's a huge influence campaign operation there. Operation Ukraine. Never hear the end of it from all the Ukrainians who started popping up all around the world in positions of power and influence. Think there was an accident? We got him peering through the veil the other day when Trump went off at ABC. You're all fake. Your polls are fake. Your elections are fake. Your candidates are fake. So is it any wonder men are walking away when you have no power, when your vote means nothing? Because it's all taken away by imported. They imported votes to make sure your vote didn't matter. That's what radical feminism and the rise of intersectionality from 96 onwards. It took hold. It took 20 years to take hold. And after 20 years, it transformed into radical feminism. The commodification of marriage and relationships and reproduction does not trace to feminism. Feminism is the hijacking by Karl Marx's daughter of the Marxist movement, which was predominantly a male movement. The core fundamentals of Marxism was the working man. It was to elevate the working class to the middle class. And they thought the idea was to replace the upper class with the political elite. A free structured society. A fundamental gutting of the 7-tier system that operated in the West. But that goes back to ancient Egypt. In Japan and China, it's a 4-tier system, although really there were tiers within tiers. I think there were 13 tiers within the top tier of the ruling class, even amongst the concubines. So it's more complex as you go around the world with the destruction of the caste system in India. It is fundamentally all secularization to create a one world government, a one religion, a one of everything. One word meant one meaning. one vision has been pumped into us through this. Originally, yes, monotheism spread not because they believed in God, but because it was easier to just say, I love God, or I blame God, or I beg God. It was easier than trying to figure out all the temple rituals to only be disappointed at the end of the day. Now, I don't know how or why different religions lasted so long if they had nothing but hope, but we can see that this fundamental change of religion and the rise of secularism has equaled to the rise of commodification of relationships. See, and now they want to democratize the workplace, which is straight out of fascism. Although it's more based on the Hungarian communist self-management system. And I forget who. Someone did a big study on it recently, and it too has actually been morphed and transformed by the Japanese principles of management. Now, this is only part one, by the way, so I'm sorry if I'm taking too long to get to a point, but the point about the commodification is it's not just the relationship, it's human reproduction, it's everything, right? There is going to be nothing in your life that's going to be free, right? You're going to pay tax for air management. You're going to water management. You already got water management. So in the next part, we'll go into the commercialization of having a baby. I know it's long-winded. There's a lot of moving parts to this. There are a lot of organizations involved. There's a lot of psychology involved. There is a lot of subconscious choices that have been taken out of your hands about everything. You had no say in the last 30 years because it was all put in motion 70 to 100 and 100 years ago, back in the 1920s, with the installation of President Roosevelt, the installation of Obama, and, God forbid, Gavin Newsom. These are all road markers to agendas that are published in the World Economic Forum, the UN, and you look at all your leading men's groups. If you see the UN marker, the pink UN marker, that is a symbol that organization is run by the UN women. A highly octopus, and if you see Quantum Group, that's Soros Foundation. Yes, and you think that it's just a matter of people's greed? No, it's choices taken away from them. It is merely most people driven by survival rather than greed. Monkey see, monkey do, copy. They're just doing what they see others do, and it's been mimicked in movies and TV shows that we don't watch, that we don't pay attention to. In books and magazines we don't read. Women live in this fantasy world, and they have walked on water while we walk on eggshells around them. Their feet barely touch the ground. We throw our jackets over the horse manure for far too long, while they demand equality that is merely a deflection from their actions, where they are increasingly tools of the manipulative opportunist with no pushback whatsoever. The majority give in every time, to every stage. There's been almost no pushback, even in Islamic countries. The corruption of religion is nearly complete to try and create one world religion, one world government, one world language. And you might think, why would China destroy its own language? Because deeply it's fundamentally an old way. They want to get rid of all the old. They want no one to remember old languages, old customs, old ways of doing things. So more and more ancient customs get pushed aside, replaced with commodification, which the majority won't go along with. So the majority of family lines die out because they want a pure single human race, which by all accounts, when you destroy variety, you end up having a catastrophic collapse of population. But because they want to have it all, they don't care if the human race ends with them and their generation, because they're not going to be around after their life is over. They're not going to be around, so they don't care what happens after they die. They don't care about consequence. They are walking on water as far as they're concerned. Their feet don't touch the ground as far as they're concerned. They're immune to their actions as far as they're concerned. And most of the time, it's us who pay the price. When war happens, leaders don't die, we die. When catastrophic population collapse, the old are the first to go, and the young are the first to suffer. Whether you're MGTOW voluntarily or have fallen into it, or you don't have to be MGTOW. You can be red pill. You can decide to turn the other way and become a pickup artist. Now, pickup artistry is a rebellion against the romanticization of relationships, because that's where it started. Romance, the idea that you have to constantly pander and stroke the ego of a woman just to hold her head and go tickle tickle hee hee. Yeah. But yeah, it's the ego of the poet. Yeah. The linguist, the academic who, well, hey, I outsmarted you, ha ha ha. Yeah. But then you have a relationship which you fundamentally often look at academics, how often they don't produce a child, or if they do only one, or how often are those children LGBTQ or worse, end up going to prison for life anyway. No, there's something fundamentally wrong with academics and academia that produces the worst in humanity as well. So before I go, yes, like I said, there's going to be a part 2 and likely a part 3. This channel is sponsored by you, the video audience. So thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. But I hope you understand now how deep and how insidious the commodification of human relationships is, and how far-reaching it is. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy merch. I appreciate each and every one of you. See you in the next video, and bye for now.